This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to DRTSPR show. This is Dr. Tangella Shivaprasad Reddy alias Dr. TSPR. Namaste, Adab, hello, and a warm welcome to Soumya Dattaji. In spite of so many, he is part of the media campaign, not just DRTSPR channels, of late, in many other channels too, because the subject matter was such that. And many were questioning me, what happened? You're through Soumya Dattaji, you predicted earthquake will happen sooner than later in Delhi, involving northern India, when people were laughing and puffing. Why you are not trying to come? I said there were some issues concerning our guest, but with his own able body system and blessings of his own family members, well wishes, best wishes from all people like us, enlightened people like us all, he has come through and he has started with a bang, that too a subject which is very very close to his heart. That is why I'm trying to say this heart is Mr. Soumya Datta. No one can disturb his heart. That is his, to his liking. That favorite subject is none other than science. He always speaks of science, and coupled with logic, then it evolves into truth, the belief. We say Satyameva Jayate everywhere under our Ashoka, this thing. That truth has to triumph and truth will prevail, has to prevail. And the topics are such that now in the national media and everywhere, the Chandrayaan 3 landing on South Pole, India joins the four other great countries, United States of America. That time it was USSR, United, and then China. Now they say India. Russia last week they were showing all visuals. It tried to land on South Pole, it failed, and so much of hoopla. And with due respects to Chandrayaan 3 mission and those great ISRO scientists and their families, we salute them, all scientists who contribute toward the success of any country technologically. We wanted to understand what is Chandrayaan 3. Did it land on South Pole? How different we are when you compare to such missions which started way back, and how is that? Are we being belittled, or we are trying to belittle someone who has been doing great job, at the same time shadow our great scientist job in ISRO and Chandrayaan 3? And at the same time, how is that? Is it a coincidence or something that you are again relating it to G20? And here we say G20, they say Prime Minister of India, I was just listening, more than 100 countries are going to come. Then I don't know what is G20. We'll find out from Mr. Soumya Datta and how closely interrelated these things are, because the government of the day, if it is taking advantage, and election year in and around in some states assemblies as well as parliament elections next year, we want everyone to take advantage, because not to forget they're all public servants, prime minister to chief minister. We are the constitutional authority. We have right to know the information, because nothing is discussed in panchayats, municipalities, assemblies and parliament, lok sabha, always top to down. That is why this confusion is prevailing. How good was Chandrayaan launch? And that is public money and great scientists, their families all involved after that failure. And in between that, ISRO's spy scandal also happened. And the G20, the countries together, are they going to take this, the latest technological marvel of Chandrayaan 3, so that India will be a big influence there? Big influence in the sense it is not Modi or Rahul or someone. India should grow. India means all citizens and their resources. Whether their resources are being looted so that only few, 1%, 2% become neo rich and start dictating like a capitalist country like America, or these resources are judiciously utilized so that the benefits are accrued by all citizens in the name of welfare and development. Then why so much of hoopla around G20, all mainstream going for G20 and Chandrayaan? I just wanted to understand, because in parliament without any discussion, under the Manipur ruckus, now latest these two big issues, Jan Vishwas bill passed, concerning life. Biodiversity Act amended. Resources, life and resources of Indians gone. Is it a gift to G20 in the name of all those corporate companies? I don't know. I'm mystified. That is why I requested Soumya Dattaji to become part of this show so that we can understand what is exactly happening. Welcome, sir, once again.
Thank you.
What is
Thank
happening,
you.
sir? What is this confusion?
See, now as everybody is seeing, people of India is celebrating that okay, India has achieved a rare feat. As you said, most of the media is saying Indian spacecraft Chandrayaan-3 has landed on the South Pole, which is not correct. I'll correct that. This is not correctly projected, but it's a great feat by Indian scientists. Not only the ISRO scientists are in forefront, but there are other scientific institutions like Physical Research Laboratory, other material science laboratories, other institutions which have also contributed to different aspects. But the lead was taken by ISRO scientists. And we must also acknowledge that all this feat has been achieved with very little monetary support, which is actually much lower than minimum required. So in that sense, Indian space scientists and Indian space engineering and space business fraternity needs a lot of kudos, you can say, a lot of congratulations, because they have achieved a high level of technology demonstration without anywhere near the budgetary supports and others which other countries have received for this kind of things. So that's where we should start, by congratulating ISRO scientists and all other Indian scientific community which were involved in this. But then
That's
we should get back to some of the details, because what we are seeing in the media is quite a lot of overhyped and misinformed propaganda. Let's start from this. This is the mission profile of Chandrayaan-3. If you can expand it a little bit on the screen, you can see on the left when the Chandrayaan-3 launch vehicle, that is the LVM-3 launch vehicle model 3, or which is actually the GSLV-3 renamed for the special mission, which launched the Chandrayaan-3 propulsion module and Nandan module together into a lower transfer orbit. And since you are seeing multiple loops around the Earth on the left hand side, loops and loops and loops, and you know Chandrayaan-3 from its launch to its landing, it took 40 days roughly. So if you recall, in early days, long time back, 1969 onwards or 68 onwards, the Apollo missions used to take 3.5 days. So why does Indian missions take 40 days, whereas American missions even more than 50 years ago, Soviet Union mission, even current Russian missions, they take 4, 5, 6 days? The main reason is ISRO don't have very powerful launching rockets. Our biggest rocket is this LVM-3 or GSLV-3, which is not really capable of launching a spacecraft of 4,000 kgs to the lunar orbit in a direct path. So what we did, intelligently enough, without spending years, without spending too much money in trying to develop even further powerful rockets, what we did is taking the gravity boost, the help of Earth's gravity, in a not exactly but somewhat like a slingshot fashion. Every time it orbited, it got the Earth's gravitational boost, and the rockets then boosted it higher. So higher and higher and higher until it came closer to the lunar gravitational attraction field, and then it got into the lunar orbit. So this orbit, though it seems a bit odd, why the spacecraft is repeatedly rotating around the Earth and repeatedly rotating around the Moon, this is to overcome the limitation of our launch vehicle rocket powers. If we had a far more powerful rocket, like the even the SpaceX Falcon Heavy, then we would have been able to send the Chandrayaan-3 maybe in 4 or 5 days to the Moon. That apart, other mission parameters were very well performed, So again, very high sort of level of achievement with a very low resource. Here I also like to mention that variously the total budget of Chandrayaan-3 project, of course, these do not include the salary of project scientists, the institutional support, the all other institutions, infrastructure, this is not included. But the rocket and the vehicle, the Chandrayaan-3 propulsion module, lander module, Vikram, and then the rover Pragyan, all this together, it's being told that something like 615 to 650 crores of rupees have been spent. This is a very low amount if you compare with any other country's space mission. But I'd like to also point out our government's priorities. If you have not forgotten, not too long ago, the same Modi government spent 3,000 crores in building a statue of Sardar Patel, which is called a Statue of Unity. 3,000 crores just for a statue built with Chinese material and built by Chinese engineers. We have spent 2,500 crores to build a statue of Shivaji or pending just in the offshore near Mumbai. We have spent another 1,000 and some crores for another statue. Compared to that, if you look at the priority of the government for such a prestigious mission for which Mr. Modi takes all the credit, in fact, looking at the media, it was obvious. It was looking like Mr. Modi has designed the Chandrayaan, Mr. Modi has built the LVM-3 rocket, Mr. Modi has built the lander and the Vikram lander and Pragyan rover. So it was looking like that. In fact, when the Chandrayaan-3 was landing, we were in live TV studios and we were commenting. Half the screen was taken up by Mr. Modi waving a flag. Half the screen Chandrayaan landing, half the screen Mr. Modi taking credit. But if you look at realities, this year, 2023, can we come to the next 2, 3 slides?
The budget you want me to show?
Maybe just the Chandrayaan one a few seconds and then we'll go to the budget. Next slide. Yes, this is the Chandrayaan landing module. Inside this, the rover Pragyan is there. This is the Vikram landing module. And I'll not go into details of which are the details, the legs, and lot of improvements have been done in this module. Instead of 5 engines, retro rockets, we have reduced it to 4 on 4 sides. The central engine has been removed so that it becomes more stable, because all of us remember that Chandrayaan 2 crash landed because it became destabilized and it crashed at a high velocity. Apart from that, the 4 engines have been made more powerful. There was more instrumentation added. So all these improvements, there are many other instruments added and improvements done. The legs have been strengthened. So a lot of research work has gone, research and development work has gone into making the lander more durable and more capable of maneuvering. And also the landing side has been increased quite a bit, from half a kilometer to half a kilometer for Chandrayaan 2 to 4+ kilometer into 2.5 kilometer. And because of the more powerful rockets, which was 740 newtons each compared to 400 newtons for Chandrayaan 2, and a larger area, Chandrayaan 3 has more maneuverability. So if at the point of landing, its hazard detection and avoidance camera saw some big boulder or some ditch, it had the capability of avoiding that and shift a bit up to 150, 160 meters and land at a more safer place. So a lot of these improvements over the last 4 years, the ISRO scientists have done. Next picture, please.
Yeah.
This is the same, the next one, where, yes, this is the uh, diagram where after landing, not immediately after, because as you know, there is a lot of dust on the lunar surface, which is called regolith, and this is very fine dust. So as the Chandrayaan 2 landed, because the 4 rockets were blasting, there are a lot of dust which was blown up by the rocket's exhaust. So it took nearly 2 hours, almost 2 hours, for the fine dust to settle down. And because it is so far south, 69 degrees southern latitude, so the sun is not very strong here. And the day started just a few hours before, the lunar day, which is 14th Earth day. So the Chandrayaan 3's lander module, which is Vikram, You can see the dark blue solar panels. They were deployed, so they needed time to get the solar right and get their batteries recharged, the instruments charged, and then the door opened and the two-stage ramp through which, through a tether, the program rover was rolled out, and then now that rover is independently moving around, not exactly independently, but it is connected with radio communication with the landing module, that is the Bikram, and the Bikram is communicating sometimes directly with the ISRO's deep space network, or sometimes if it is not getting a direct access, then through the orbiter of the Chandrayaan-2 orbiter, the earlier orbiter. So this is the whole mission, and now the scientific experiments have started. Now we can get back to next slide. Yes, this is actually uh, no, this is actually, let us talk about all the media hype that India is the first nation. If you have seen the headlines, the moon is ours, and this was in as reliable. This is a stupid headline in as reliable a newspaper as Indian Express, which had a half a page headline called "The Moon is Ours," as if no one has gone to the moon earlier, and we have been the first, and we have captured the moon. Now I need to bring back a little bit of, not long, a very recent history. In 1966, the Soviet Union and the then Soviet Union and the United States of America, both of them, 66, 67, finally in 69, you know, the United States, they landed 3 astronauts in a big vehicle, the Apollo 11. But 3 years before that, in 1966, the Soviet Union's Luna 9 made a soft landing on the moon. That's the first soft landing on the moon. And I'm saying it again, it is 1966. So 1966 means 34 plus 23, 57 years ago. So saying in 2020, the moon is ours, Chand hamare mutti mein, it's just stupid and nonsense. It's just hyping up our over hyper nationalistic sentiment. These do not have any place in the scientific community. There are four nations. India is the fourth nation which has landed on the moon, soft landed on the moon. There are two others which has capability of landing on the moon. Japan has the capability, and European Space Agency has the capability. They have chosen other areas as their priority areas. So just a soft landing on the moon, which is a big scientific achievement, no doubt, do not mean we have conquered the moon. I have seen in several language headlines. We have conquered the moon. हम चांद को मुट्ठी में ले लिया. The moon is in our grip. So all these are not true. There are, as I am saying, starting from 57 years ago, there were dozens and dozens of moon landings, successful soft landings on the moon, starting with Luna 9, the Russian, then the Surveyor spacecraft of the USA, then the Apollo mission, 6 of the Apollo missions landed 12 people, 12 astronauts on the moon, left lot of instruments, collected lot of samples. The Luna 19 was the first one to collect lunar samples, not only land on the moon automatically, but also collect lunar samples automatically and then come back to Earth with those samples. India is yet to reach there, and hopefully by Chandrayaan 4 or 5, we will be sending a lunar sample return mission. Recently, in the last 7-8 years, China has sent 4 missions to the moon, and China's first mission, Chang'e 2 or 3, was a soft landing with a rover. That's 10 years before us. And then in 2020, China's Chang'e 5 had a lunar sample return mission. That means China sent Chang'e 5 spacecraft to moon. It soft landed, it deployed the rover, it collected lunar samples, rocks and soil. It got them back into Chang'e 5's relaunch vehicle, relaunch module. It came up to the lunar orbit, and then the propulsion module brought it back to Earth. It landed, and those samples are already in Chinese laboratories. So saying just by soft landing, which is again a very good achievement by ISRO, saying that we have conquered the moon is nothing but stupid. So let me highlight that and not go into too many details. So many, as I said, this diagram will show you how many successful soft landings have taken place on the moon. You can see on the red, these are the Soviet missions. On the blue, these are the American missions. On the orange color, these are the Chinese missions, Chang'e 3 onward. And the only green one is the Indian mission. Of course, to India's credit, India's lunar Chandrayaan-3 has landed again not on the south pole of the moon but on the south polar region. One must understand that both the Vikram lander and the Pragyan rover could not have been operating if they had tried to land, even if they had landed on the lunar south pole, because the lunar south pole gets very little sunlight, and both the Pragyan rover and the Vikram lander are powered by solar panels. So even if by chance they could have landed on the south pole, they would not have operated, they would be sitting like ducks, dead ducks. So they landed at a latitude, selenological latitude of 69 degrees. Just like by going to Falkland Islands, you cannot claim that I have gone to the south pole of the earth. Similarly, by landing at 69 degrees lunar latitude south, you cannot claim that we have gone to the south pole of the moon. South pole of the moon is roughly around 600, 500 some kilometers from the spot where Chandrayaan-3 landed. But that apart, it is good that this Chandrayaan-3 landed on the southern polar region, because the reason is these regions do not get much sunlight. They get sunlight, but they are generally shaded for a large part. So the guesses and some evidence has been obtained that if there is some large amounts of water, ice available on the moon, which will be essential for human exploration, human settlement. Without water, you cannot have a long-term settlement. So all these, if these are there, they will be available in very shaded region where not lot of sunlight reaches, like just in our mountains. If a glacier is exposed, fully exposed to the sun, the snow and ice melts and go away. If a glacier is shaded, lot of ice remains. Similarly, the lunar southern polar region is supposed to have some water. That's the importance. It's an important mission, but it's not on South Pole. It's not the first mission on the moon. It's not that moon is ours. It's not that we have done the first in everything. The Chinese Chang'e 4 or Chang'e 5 mission was the first mission similarly to land on the far side of the moon, the side of the moon that you cannot see from the earth. So every nation chooses its own priorities. Of course, the new Russian mission, Luna 25, they did it in haste. Their managers actually were trying to show that we can do it very quickly, and they messed up. Otherwise, the Luna 25 spacecraft was well equipped to land there also. But let's not go into that. Let's say Indian scientists have done a great achievement, but the political setup had very little, and the moon has many missions have landed on the moon, as you can see in this diagram. It's dotted with landing spots, soft landing spots, rover spots, human landing spots. So we have not conquered the moon. We have not acquired the moon. Now tomorrow onwards we cannot buy land parcel in the moon. All these are rubbish. So can we go into the next please?
Yeah, all these are rubbish. It is in the South Polar region, north in the South Pole, and already many missions are there. Right from 1969, every evidence on the screen, please. At least they'll put a full stop to this.
See, this now is, can you increase the screen? Huh. These are detail. In fact, as I was saying, I will not go into detail, that it is not only landing, moon rock, moon soil, etc. had been collected many times. But apart from moon, let's also understand that several nations, Japan, European Space Agency, and NASA, have sent missions to moon. Is average distance to the moon is only about 3,84,000 kilometers. And right now the moon is very close, around 3,58,000 or 59,000 kilometers. But Japan's Hayabusa 1 mission went far beyond, landed on an asteroid which is beyond the Mars, beyond the planet Mars, collected samples and came back. The Hayabusa 2 is also doing that. There is an European Space Agency mission which is similarly collecting asteroid samples. So there are plenty of examples of much more complex mission being achieved. As I said, the moon you can look in the without any aid by your clear eyes. The moon is big, moon is easier to target, but an asteroid which you cannot see even with a binocular, you have to look through very powerful telescope and which are much smaller. Even the Ceres, which is a big asteroid, is only 500 kilometers across. So smaller asteroids are extremely difficult to locate even. So Japan, the European Space Agency and NASA all have sent missions to all those. NASA has sent missions to Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, even Pluto and beyond. So let us admit that the space endeavor is an internationally cooperative mission. Each nation that comes later on build on earlier learnings and whatever the earlier expeditions and explorations have done. So this hyper nationalistic propaganda by our Modi government needs to be discarded right away. So that's my point. So we are not the first to do everything, though we are the first nation to land in the lunar south polar region. That is important. And that credit goes to ISRO. Now to the point whether Modi government really can claim the credit. In fact, if you have seen half the space, if you see posters, you don't see posters of either the ISRO chairman S. Somanath or Veera Muthuvelu, the project director, or K. Kalpana, the associate project director. You see half the posters, Mr. Modi and lunar landscape, as if Mr. Modi has done all the work. Let's come to the reality, the hard reality. This year, 2023, much before the Chandrayaan was launched in July, in February, early February, when the budget was presented, ISRO's limited budget was cut by 1,200 crores. From 13,700 crores last year, this year ISRO got only 12,500 crores. That is an 8% cut, a big cut. But if you consider inflation of 6% plus, that's a 11 to 12% cut in the budget of ISRO in the year it was launching Chandrayaan 3, and soon on September 2 or 3 it will be launching the Aditya L1 mission, and then preparations and all for the Gaganayan mission. So this year ISRO's budget has been cut. So on one hand, Mr. Modi is taking a lot of credit as if he encouraged, he went to Bengaluru, he almost cried. I don't know, I didn't understand what was the reason for becoming almost crying and shedding tears. That was a joyful occasion, so you need not have shed artificial tears. But actually the budget has been cut drastically. So if somebody feels that by cutting a budget of a department you are encouraging the department, okay, that's kind of very crossed, varied thinking that anybody, any bhaktas are welcome to that thinking. Let us go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, now I think it is clear that the Chandrayaan 3 mission budget has been cut by the same government.
See, actually, if you look back, who established Indian space program? Indian space program started with the organization called INCOSPAR, Indian National Committee for Space Research. That was in
That's
1962.
yeah, I saw
1962.
that.
So I hope even dedicated bhaktas will not say that 1962 Mr. Modi was the Prime Minister and he was encouraging for the space mission to be established. Actually, the entire space infrastructure was established under the patronship of Jawaharlal Nehru, and Bikram Sarabhai, as the leading scientist, he took charge of this. At that point of time in 62, the name was INCOSPAR, Indian National Committee for Space Research. In 69, this was changed to ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization. It was still under Department of Atomic Energy, but then it was just hold it here, and it was then changed to, it was brought back to an independent department. So that's the history. And at that point of time, if you see ISRO, because India was then a very poor nation, 47 we got independence. It was a very poor nation. The British looted us for 190 years. So 62 we had very little resources. Primary priority was feeding people. Even then, Nehru had the vision of establishing the Department of Space through INCOSPAR. So can we go into the next? Yes, we got this. Then next please. Yes, in fact, there was a lot of talk. It's not only the Department of Space's budget has been cut drastically. I'd also referred to, if you look at how budgetary allocations are evaluated, any department, as the nation becomes, its GDP grows both because of inflation and because of actual growth. There are two-way growths. So as your GDP grows, as a percentage of your GDP, you allocate a certain percentage to all areas. You allocate to education. Say India allocates to education around 2.92%. India allocates to space during the Nehru and Indira Gandhi and other years. The Department of Space used to get something like 0.06, 0.07 percentage of GDP, and that used to be a comparatively smaller absolute unit. Of course, in 1970, 100 crore and today's 100 crore are entirely different. So you cannot compare absolute terms. You have to compare what is the percentage of GDP that a nation gives. So earlier years, during Indira Gandhi's years or those years, the allocation to the Department of Space was something like 0.06 to 0.07%. Today, in great hype, nationalistic hype, I have launched the Chandrayaan 3. I am sending Aditya. The allocation to Department of Space is 0.035 percentage of GDP. I am saying it again. Long back it was 0.06 to 0.07. Today it is 0.035, roughly half of what it was being given as a percentage of GDP. So again, we can see what is the priority of this government to science and technology, to space. And this data that you can see in your screens now, it is the R&D spending that the country spent. Just forget about 197, 200 countries around the world. Just now the BRICS summit took place in Johannesburg. Amongst the BRICS countries also, which are most of them except Russia, just like emerging economies like India, amongst the BRICS countries, India spends by far the lowest amount of its GDP in research and development. India spends roughly around 0.8% of its GDP in research and development. China spends around uh, 1 China spends about 2%. Russia and Brazil, South Africa all spends over 1%, 1.1, 1.2. China spends 2% of its GDP on R&D. India spends 0.8%, 0.8% or in R&D. To the millions of young people who are looking to the Chandrayaan 3 mission, the Aditya 11 mission, and getting inspired and thinking that we will also join, because I was there in the TV studios in India TV, ABP News, etc. A lot of young people were also there getting enthused. Crores of young people have got enthused and they are thinking of joining scientific research. If you are not spending your money, your public money on R&D, if you are not spending your public money on education, how are you going to give your young youth the chance to get educated, the chance to attempt to do something good on science and technology? You can only talk big and do even worse. So I think there is a time to expose this, and there is a time for the people of this country to demand from the government, please walk the talk. What you are talking, you are not doing. You are doing exactly opposite. So I think this data is important in the sense that it brings the real picture in front of us. What we are doing is denying a very large percentage of India's youth who are not from the upper middle class and the elite classes, who cannot spend their own money to go into good institutions and get good education, science and technology education. you are actually denying roughly 60-65% of the population a chance to participate and a chance to contribute to India's science and technology development. Next slide, please.
Yeah, maybe because of employment talk which they have done on every election, maybe so that the youth will not challenge them on that employment, enthused
Yes,
on
you can
this.
also see this, and it is not very low. Actually, in the last 10 years, from 2008-9, the actual expenditure on R&D was around 0.8%. Till 2017-18, that is roughly 9-10 years, that R&D spending actually has come down to 0.7% of GDP. From 0.8% of GDP, which was already low, the Modi government has brought it down to 0.7%, which is even lower. So you can understand the priorities. Plus, as I was saying, the primary criteria for a nation's becoming a knowledge economy, encouraging their youth to contribute, to learn, to grow, and to contribute through knowledge and innovation to the national economy and to humanity's growth, is education. In India, the education budget as a percentage of our GDP is pathetically low. It's less than 3%. And we must not forget that in 1968 National Policy on Education, it was approved by the Parliament that 6% of the GDP will be given to education. Today, that was 1968. Today in 2023, we give 2.92% of our GDP to education. So, and if you look at again BRICS countries, don't go to US or Nordic countries, European countries which spend much, much higher. Forget about them. Look at South Africa, Brazil. These are countries comparable to us. They spend anything from 4.5 to 6% of their GDP on education. We spend 2.92%. If this is not denying India's youth the chance to get educated, the chance to acquire knowledge, the chance to become knowledge economy and contribute to this country's advancement and humanity's advantage, then I think it's actually the government is fooling the people at large. The people have a right to know this information and challenge this government and demand that this changes drastically. Next slide, please. Now let us come to the G20, because we have talked about Chandrayaan and we have talked about India will launch and we have talked about how the Chandrayaan-3 mission is being milked actually for political reasons. In fact, Chandrayaan-3 mission has not grown in the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. If you remember, Chandrayaan-1 mission was in 2008. Obviously, Mr. Modi was not in power. Chandrayaan-1 mission was built upon the launch vehicles. The launch vehicles, GSLV 1, 2, etc., these were developed in the 1990s, starting on 1990s. The liquid propulsion engine, the Bikash engine, these were developed from 1990s. So every such space mission, which has lot of tens of thousands of components welded together, mixed together, they depend on long history of development. And fortunately enough, India's governments have, in spite of our poverty, in spite of many deprivations, at least for the space mission, there was a continuous support. And as I said earlier, the support was much higher as a percentage of GDP, 0.06. Now it has come down to 0.035. So we need to bring it up again. But apart from that, these missions and the recent happenings are being milked for political purposes, and these are actually narrowing down the society's choices. You cannot divide a society and hope to progress as a nation. If we look at both Chandrayaan-3 and G20, one person has tried to hog the limelight. Let's come Chandrayaan-2, Chandrayaan-3, Chandrayaan-1, GSLV launch vehicles, PSLV launch vehicles. As I said, these are much before Mr. Modi became the Prime Minister. So these are all sequential developments. So now let us go back to G20. There is a huge amount of propaganda in the media that Mr. Modi's power is now being recognized. India has become, under Mr. Modi, India has become Vishwaguru. So we have been made the president of G20. What is the reality? G20 is a group of 20 largest economies. India is one of the largest 20 economies by the sheer number of its people. As all of us know, India today has 142 crores plus people. India has just overtaken China in the number of people that it has. But in terms of per capita, I will come to that later. In the G20, there are 20 member countries. These are the largest by GDP. Each nation gets the presidency in 1 year. So India has not got its presidency because India is something special. The year before, in 2022, Indonesia and Mr. Duterte, the Indonesian president, was the chair of G20. So do we then have to admit that Mr. Duterte is a much bigger personality than Mr. Modi? He is a much bigger Vishwaguru than Mr. Modi because he got the G20 presidency before Mr. Modi. So these are again nonsense. These are stupid media presentations, and that's why the media, largely the mainstream media, is Godi media today. What the government tells them to do, they just take the notes, stenographic notes, and publish them in their papers or in their media TV channels. Let us make it very clear. G20 presidency is a rotational presidency. Each of the 20 countries get the presidency for 1 year. And I think India's term is either 14th or 15th year of G20. India is getting its presidency. Next year, Brazil will be its president. Previous year, Indonesia was its president. That do not mean that Indonesia is bigger than India in prestige and other things. That also do not mean Brazil is lesser than India in all those things. So let us make this clear that there is nothing great in India getting the G20 presidency. It's a rotational presidency. Second, India as G20 president, India has a role. Every G20 president has a role based on that time's current equation of the political, economic, social equation. Last year onward, when Indonesia was president, Indonesian president made a lot of political effort. And as we all know, presently the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where Russia invaded Ukraine, there are instances why Russia, there are a lot of opinions. The NATO was expanding, so Russia won. There are excuses, counter excuses, claims, counter claims. We will not go into that. But that was one of the major reasons of global destabilization, global prices spiraling, energy prices spiraling, food prices going up and beyond many poor countries. So one of the tasks that the Indonesian president did, he tried his best to solve this. He failed. Mr. Modi tried to intervene. He didn't succeed. So Ukrainian conflict was there from February 2022. It is still ongoing. So neither the Ukrainian presidency of G20 nor the Indian presidency of G20 could do a single thing in resolving the greatest challenge the world is facing. One is the Ukrainian conflict. Second, the climate crisis. Everyone knows over the last 3-4 months, if you have seen the news, global news media, there is climate chaos. The climate catastrophe is happening all over the world. From massive heat wave in Europe, where 15,000 plus people have died, premature death, to massive heat wave right now ongoing in Europe and Northern Africa, to massive flooding in many of our cities and many of our places. Right now, the Himachal is being devastated, Uttarakhand, Himachal being devastated. Similarly, there are massive flooding and others in some of the Latin American countries. So this is, some of the African countries are facing unprecedented drought. Crores and crores of people are now displaced because their land is now dry and barren. There is an unprecedented forest fire going on in Canada, and US is polluted. With all their money, technology and management and high technology, Canada, US and other advanced countries can't do a single thing to control those fires. So there is a massive climate crisis which is affecting the world. And this is one of the major challenges in front of the world. What is G20 doing? G20 actually has increased its fossil fuel subsidies over the last 2 years, including India. All of these G20, almost all of these G20 countries, except some countries in the European Union, all of them have increased their budgetary support and hidden subsidies for coal, oil and gas, thus increasing the climate crisis. All of them have failed to do anything except some mild effort by China of reconciliation. No one, including our great Vishwaguru, has been doing anything, has done anything noteworthy to resolve the Ukraine conflict, to resolve or to even minimize the climate crisis, or to minimize the third major crisis facing the world, which is massive inequality in the global income equality, wealth inequality, and financial concentration. So we don't see any role the G20 has played for the common people. And on the contrary, let us go to the next slides.
Yeah. This is nothing but an advertisement for capitalists to loot. Corporates.
Yes, this is the same thing. The group's chair rotates annually. And this is
Yeah.
also what I was talking about. Share of education in budgetary allocation over the last 7 years under Modi government has actually gone down. So we are becoming our drum beating says Mr. Modi is taking us to be Vishwaguru, but we will be the illiterate, uneducated, laughingstock Vishwagurus. So let us also look at where India stands in G20. India claims to be the fifth largest economy, going to be the third largest economy. From Switzerland onwards, these are the per capita GDP of the G20 countries. The first 10, India stands nowhere. Let us go to the next.
Now it says it is beating United Kingdom. So much of I don't know
Next,
how they are
now
trying.
you can see out of the 20 G20 countries, India's position is by far the lowest in terms of per capita GDP, even almost half of what Indonesia has. Look at Indonesia and India. Indonesia is not a developed country. Brazil is just developing country. So India's per capita income is a little bit higher than 50% of Indonesia's. And Indonesia was the president last year. Indonesia is a developing country. Lot of poor people. Of course, India has the largest number of poor people. So if we claim that by spending the least amount in terms of education as percentage of GDP, by spending by far the lowest amount of R&D in as percentage of GDP, by being the poorest in terms of per capita income amongst the G20, we are Vishwaguru. Then those who are claiming and those Godi media, their brains need to be examined whether they have any gray matter or their G matter, that is Gobar matter, that needs to be examined. And apart from that, let me come to the last point. What is happening during these G20 meetings? Each and every major city that is hosting some G20 meetings. Delhi is hosting large number of G20 meetings apart from the leaders summit where presidents and prime ministers are coming. But a lot of other cities including Lucknow and Hyderabad and many other cities are holding different G20 meetings on culture, on business, on these and that, on education. In every city, houses and shops of the poor people have been demolished. Slums and other things have been covered up with curtains. Shops and which the authorities deem to be not good looking, those have been demolished without prior notice, contravening the law. The law says if you have to demolish even an unauthorized structure, you have to give prior notice. Without giving prior notice, tens of thousands of poor people's houses and shops have been demolished. More than 1600 to 2000 houses have been demolished in Delhi itself to quote unquote beautify the city, to present a beautiful city to the G20 delegates. If this is the human face of G20 Vishwaguru, then we better look for something else. And there are reports and reports and reports galore. You look at these people. Just few weeks back, Delhi was hit by one of the worst floods, and the people who were hit by that worst flood, many of those houses have been demolished because they were decided to be ugly, not beautiful enough, not presentable enough to G20 delegates from other countries. So we are hiding our realities just to just with this crooked concept, this ugly concept of beautiful cities. And that's the real face of Vishwaguru. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. It's pleasure to host you, and I hope now this show will, I should say, Hindi word, the connotation which you always use, phrasing, दूध का दूध पानी का पानी. Now we will leave it to the concerned citizens. नागरिकों को सोचना चाहिए. हमने आज पूरे विस्तार के साथ, आधार के साथ, कानूनी के दौर पर, संविधान के प्रस्तावित करते हुए हमारे अतिथिगण सौम्य दत्ता जी ने सब कुछ आपके सामने लगाया कि चंद्रयान 3 को सोलर पोल पे नहीं, सोलर पोलर रीजन में, वहां पर
साउथ पोल में नहीं, साउथ पोलर
रीजन, साउथ पोलर रीजन में वहां पर उसको लैंड किया गया है. और इसके पहले 1955 से ही
66 से 1966
66 से ही 66 से ही वहां पर लैंडिंग हो रहा है. और जिस तरह लैंडिंग हो रहा है और वहां से पुनः वहां के जो भी चीज है सब वापस भी लाया गया है. चाइना लाया, ले आया, तब सोवियत यूनियन ले आया, अमेरिका, और उसके ऊपर वहां पर परिशोधन भी चालू हुए, शुरू हुए. लेकिन हमारे को इस तरह का मीडिया का प्रस्ताव किया जाता कि भारत ने पहले वहां पर, और वहां लोगों को भी बड़े बड़े सैटेलाइट्स में, हमें रॉकेट्स में वहां ले जाया गया. और यहाँ पर वहाँ 4-5 दिन ले रहे थे. लेकिन हमारे वैज्ञानिक ने हमारी इस तरह रॉकेट की तैयारी की जो कम दाम, बहुत कम दाम, क्योंकि इसरो को, चंद्रयान को भी नजरअंदाज किया गया सरकार द्वारा, और उसके आंकड़े भी हम आपके साथ में लगाए. पिछले वर्ष में क्या बजट था इसरो का, आज किस तरह बजट काट दिया गया, फिर भी हमारे वैज्ञानिकों ने उसी कम बजट में हमारी ज्ञान के साथ, उत्पन्न हुई ज्ञान के साथ ही रॉकेट 40 दिन इसीलिए ले जाया गया क्योंकि वो पावरफुल नहीं थे. लेकिन वो हमारे शक्तिपूर्ण, हमारे मस्तिष्क से जो आया, और ये बजट को कम करने के बाद भी हमारे वैज्ञानिकों ने, इसरो ने, और उसके साथ में काफी कंट्रीब्यूटरी लोग ने इसको सफल कर दिखाया. और हम खाली वहां पर एक अच्छी तरह से लैंड भी हुआ, और वो रोवर, लैंड रोवर जो है अपना काम भी करना शुरू किया है. ये एक अच्छा परिणाम है. लेकिन ये बोलना हम ही पहले है और हम ही वहीं रहेंगे और एक वहां एक राष्ट्र सजाएंगे, ये गलत है. और इस तरह के समाचार हमारे मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया जो दे रही है लोगों को गुमराह करने के लिए, राजनीति करने के लिए, राजनीतिक दलों को, ये गलत है. और इस तरह की गलती हम कतई ही नहीं करना चाहिए, क्योंकि हमारे वैज्ञानिक इतना मेहनत करके जो भी कर रहे हैं उनको हम सलाम करते हैं. ये हमारी अतिथिगण ने बताया. और जब इस तरह की माहौल क्यों है, 40 दिन क्यों लग रहा है हमारे को वहां पर जाने के लिए, और इतने साल क्यों लिया हम, इसका बदौलत यही है. और ये चंद्रयान भी उस जमाने में पंडित नेहरू जी ने शुरू किया था, और तब एटॉमिक एनर्जी के साथ में था, और जाके, हाँ बट सर,
स्पेस प्रोग्राम, चंद्रयान नहीं, स्पेस प्रोग्राम शुरू किया था.
या इसरो नहीं, इसरो के बदले में वो चंद्रयान स्पेस प्रोग्राम था तब, वो इसरो में 1969 में बदला है. और ये कहते कि नेहरू 1964 में मर गए, तो 1969 में इसरो का नाम हुआ. लेकिन 1962 में ही इसका जन्म हुआ था, और वहां से इसरो बनने के लिए 1969 हुआ, और तब से ये लोग करते हुए आए वैज्ञानिक दल. और इस बीच में वो स्पाइस स्कैंडल भी क्या है, हम उसके ज्यादा हम इस शो में भी बता चुके हैं. और कौन सा वो यूपी लेता है श्रेय, कौन लेता है वो लेने दीजिए, हम, क्योंकि हम हमारे वैज्ञानिक के साथ में है. उनको बजट में कटौती करने के बाद भी आज चंद्रयान मिशन को उन्होंने सही तरीके से वहां पर लैंड किया है, और वो आदित्य मिशन के द्वारा सूर्य का अपने जाना चाहते हैं. लेकिन इस बीच में लोगों को, हमारे नागरिकों को ये जानना है, मार्स, जुपिटर और छोटे छोटे जो है, ऑलरेडी हर कोई बड़ा देश जा चुका है. जापान भी जा चुका है, अमेरिका, रशिया, अक्सर ये लोग वहां पर जाते हैं, चाइना भी. लेकिन वहां इस तरह की पब्लिसिटी नहीं होती, इस तरह की राजनीति नहीं होती, क्योंकि वो विज्ञान और हमारे वैज्ञानिकों ने उसको समाज के दौर पर, और किस तरह उनकी वो समाज को आगे लेके जाए, ये नई तकनीकों द्वारा, आधुनिक तकनीक के द्वारा वो सोचते हैं. इसीलिए वहां पर ज्यादातर ये राजनीति हंगामा नहीं रहता जिस तरह हमारे पास हो रहा है. ये अच्छी बात नहीं है, क्योंकि वैज्ञानिक इतनी दिमाग और इतनी मेहनत करके वो हमारे देश को आगे ले जाना चाह रहे हैं। बजट कटौती के बाद भी आंकड़े के साथ ने आज हम डीआरटीएस पर चैनल्स के सामने रखा है, मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया को भी चैलेंज करते हैं, गुमराह मत करिए, आंकड़े सही आंकड़े यहाँ पर है। ये क्योंकि जिस तरह अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, बेरोजगारी बढ़ती जा रही है और बेरोजगारी की नाम से और कीमती महंगाई कितनी बढ़ रही है, उसको हटाने के लिए और जन विश्वास या बायोडाइवर्सिटी बिल हमारी जान और हमारे रिसोर्सेस को जिस तरह लूटा जा रहा है, इन सभी चीजों को बाहर और नजरअंदाज करने के लिए इस तरह गुमराह नहीं करना चाहिए, क्योंकि जो सत्य है वही लोगों को हम बताना चाहिए। हम वही सत्य को हमारे अतिथिगण के द्वारा आपको बताया है और इसका पूरा श्रेय जो कहते हैं G20 हम सरकार मोदी जी बोलते हैं कि 100 देश आ रहे हैं भाई, जब G20 है 100 देश कैसे आ सकते हैं उसमें ग्रुप में, नए आमंत्रित कर सकते हैं। उसके नाम पर दिल्ली में हो या हर शहर में लोगों के, गरीब लोगों के घर जो है गिराए जा रहे हैं। तो ये बताने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि गरीबी कहीं नहीं है और पर्दे भी लगाए जा रहे हैं। जब आप गरीब के घर और गली और अच्छे तरीके से नहीं दिखाई दे रही है, वहां पूरा विकास के नाम पर तोड़ दिया जा रहा है। ये कहाँ की विकास है भाई? G20 का यही है क्या असल मुद्दा? जब बाली में इंडोनेशिया ने जब करा था, किस तरह वहां गरीबों को ऊपर लाने की कोशिश की, लेकिन इस तरह की राजनीति वहां नहीं चली जिस तरह G20 को लेके है राजनीति हमारे भारत देश में चल रहा है। क्योंकि यहाँ पर शासन सभा के चुनाव है और अगले साल हमारी पार्लियामेंट की चुनाव है, इसीलिए जो भी मौका मिलता है उसको राजनीति करके राजनीति प्रयोग करना चाहते हैं और लोगों को सही समाचार इसीलिए नहीं दे जाना चाह रहे हैं। इसीलिए हम G20 का पोल भी आज अतिथिगण ने खोला है। विद्या में हो या स्वास्थ्य में, जो G20 के जो देश हैं उनसे कहीं नीचे ये भारत देश है। क्यों है? अगर आप विद्या पे खर्च नहीं करेंगे, आप यहीं इसी तरह नीचे रहेंगे आप। और इसका फलस्वरूप चंद्रयान जैसे मिशन के ऊपर हमारे वैज्ञानिक के ऊपर गिर रहा है। क्योंकि अगर आप पढ़े लिखे समाज को नहीं स्थापित करते, कैसे हम मिशन में सक्सेसफुल होंगे? इसीलिए हमको इतने दशाब्द काल हमको रोकना पड़ा वैज्ञानिकों द्वारा इस तरह के मिशन चलाने के लिए। क्योंकि आपको विद्या में बजटी खत्म और स्वास्थ्य, एक देश इस तरह की चुनौती अगर लेना चाहता है, उनके देश के जो नागरिक है वो स्वस्थ रहना चाहिए। स्वास्थ्य के नाम पे कितना खर्च कर रहे हैं पूरे आंकड़ों के साथ? G20 में हम लास्ट हैं, विद्या में हो या स्वास्थ्य में हो। और पर कैपिटा इनकम आजकल ये हर एक मुख्यमंत्री से कि प्रधानमंत्री और ये प्रतिपक्ष नायक का भी लोगों का भी एक बड़ा नारा, हमारे जमाने में पर कैपिटा इनकम, एक जो कमाई होती है हर एक नागरिक की, हमने उसको स्वस्थ रूप से बढ़ाया। जब आंकड़े आज आपके स्क्रीन में हम डाले तो हम इंडोनेशिया के नीचे है। और इंडोनेशिया के कैसे नीचे? अगर वहां आंकड़ा 1000 रुपये है, हमारे भारत उसके आधे 500 रुपये से भी नीचे है। क्या मोदी जी और मोदी सरकार क्या बताएगी? और मीडिया जो दूसरी तरह से दिखाई दे रही, क्या यह सत्य नहीं है कि हम पर कैपिटा या विद्या हो या हमारी स्वास्थ्य हो और अलग अलग मूल स्वरूप के जो भी चीज है वहां पर हम नीचे स्तर पे है या नहीं? और साथ में पर्यावरण, जब यही बता रहे, पेरिस में क्या कहा था मोदी जी ने, लेकिन तुरंत यहाँ भारत आते ही जो G20 के बाकी दो देश है उन्हीं के तरह यहाँ पर आते ही ऊर्जा कोल के द्वारा और उसके द्वारा ऊर्जा के नए कॉन्ट्रैक्ट आप दिए या नहीं? इससे कार्बन और ज्यादा होगा, उसके साथ हमारी पर्यावरण की क्षति होगी और इसका पूरा फलस्वरूप जो है हर एक नागरिक के जीवन प्रमाण पे होगा, स्वास्थ्य से लेकर उसकी जीवन प्रमाण पे ऊपर। ये सही नहीं है क्या कि इतने सब कुछ आप गलत बताते हुए जो असत्य है उसका प्रचार कर रहे हैं? और G20 जैसे देशों की ऐसे सदस्य में किस तरह गरीबी हटाना चाहिए और मूल सिद्धांतों पर किस तरह विद्या हो, वैद्या हो, स्वास्थ्य हो, ऐसे मूल और जो कार्बन एमिशंस की जो बात हो रही है, ऊर्जा की बात हो रही है, नई ऊर्जा की तरफ किस तरह जाए, इसके ऊपर चर्चा ना करे, आप असत्य प्रचार करके सब कुछ यहाँ पर भारत में और G20 में सब कुछ सही सलामत है, और वहाँ या यहाँ नागरिकों को गुमराह करने की जो कोशिश कर रहे हैं उसको नाकाम करने के लिए आज हमारे अतिथिगण ने पूरे आंकड़ों की वो आधार लिया है, और आपके स्क्रीन पे हम सब कुछ बता चुके हैं। क्या इस तरह चलेगा? विज्ञान हो चंद्रयान 3 का, या G20 सदस्य जिसके फलस्वरूप हर देश के नागरिक और वहां पर उनके जो रिसोर्सेस है, पानी से लेके हवा तक, और ऊर्जा जो भी बोलते हैं आप, कोयले से लेके सब कुछ, वो हर एक नागरिक का हक है और वो हकदार है। प्रधानमंत्री से ले मुख्यमंत्री तक केवल सेवक है। सेवक जो है पंचायत में चर्चा नहीं करते हैं, पुरपालक शाखा म्युनिसिपालिटीज में चर्चा नहीं होती, हर एक राष्ट्र विधानसभा में चर्चा नहीं होती। खासकर इस बार पार्लियामेंट सेशन हुआ, जब G20 की बात आती, G20 क्या है और वो G20 के द्वारा हम क्या हासिल करने वाले हैं, वहां पर कुछ चर्चा हुआ? खाली हम लीडर है, हम लीडर है, हम G20, खाली हमारे प्रधानमंत्री उनके डालने से क्या होगा? ये G20 से क्या फायदा हमको है? और हर एक नगर और एक शहर में आप G20 की सेपरेट सदस्य कर रहे हैं, और ये सब कुछ जो है प्रजा का पैसा है, ये पब्लिक मनी है, हमारी संपत्ति है वो, और बिना समाचार नागरिक को दिए आप हर एक राष्ट्र में देश पूरा ये हंगामा G20 भाई मैं पूछ रहा हूं G20 से मेरे को क्या? मेरे पैसे आप वहां पर गिरवी रखते हो, आप, मैं जो टैक्स बनता हूं ये सभी पैसे से आप वहां नए नए रोड्स डाल रहे, सब कुछ खत्म करके घरों घर ये कर दे रहे आप, और नए नए हंगामे कर रहे आप। ये मेरा पैसा नहीं है, ये हंगामा किस लिए? ये वर्तमान या भविष्य मेरे बच्चों के लिए किस तरह मेरे काम आएगा? ये बिना ये सब कुछ बताए ये राजकीय तमाशा, ये हंगामा, आज यहां कल वहां और कितने दिन। इसीलिए ऐसे अतिथिगण द्वारा DRTSPR चैनल्स के द्वारा हम आपको सच बताने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, सत्य के सिवा कुछ नहीं बता रहे। और कोई भी विरोध करना चाहते हैं और कोई भी हमें गलत साबित करना चाहते हैं, हम आपको आमंत्रित करते हैं हमारे फ्लायर में मेरा मोबाइल नंबर के साथ, टॉपिक क्या करने वाले हैं, कब हम अपलोड करने वाले हैं या लाइव कब करने वाले हैं, और आपको कुछ क्षति पहुंची या कि आप इस तरह इसे सहमत नहीं है, आपके पास सही आंकड़े हैं, संविधान के दौर पर, कानून के दौर पर, आधार के दौर पर आप आइए, हम अतिथिगण को स्वागत करेंगे, हम चर्चा करेंगे, क्योंकि हम लोकतंत्र है, लोकतंत्र में चर्चा ही करनी चाहिए। और किस तरह? कानून के दौर पर, आधार के दौर पर, संविधान के दौर पर, क्योंकि जब हम संविधान कहते हैं हर एक नागरिक जो है यहाँ संविधान है। जब हम समाचार दे रहे हैं इसी की दृष्टिकोण से दे रहे हैं, गलत साबित करिए हमें, क्या फायदा है हम G20 से? और ये सच नहीं है कि चंद्रयान बहुत पूर्व वहां अगले जो देश है वहां पर सफल रहे, और वहां से जो भी है चंद्रमा से वो नीचे लाए हैं, और वहां पर एस्ट्रोनॉट्स भी भेजा गया है, ये सही नहीं है। लेकिन वह वहीं पर आप बजट कटौती की है चंद्रयान मिशन को, इसरो को, मोदी जी पिछले साल से, फिर भी हमारे वैज्ञानिक हमारी रॉकेट से वहां 4-5 दिन लेते, लेकिन हम 40 दिन कम खर्च के द्वारा हमारे निजी रॉकेट से आज चंद्रमा में हम सफल हुए या नहीं, इसका श्रेय किसको जाना है? हमारे वैज्ञानिकों को, इसरो के द्वारा, और कंट्रीब्यूटर्स डायरेक्टली और इनडायरेक्ट कंट्रीब्यूट जो भी किया है उनको जाना चाहिए या नहीं? और आप गलत आंकड़े जो बजट में पिछले साल से अगर ये साल आप देखें तो सही है या नहीं, आप कम किया या नहीं? तो ऐसे सब कुछ आज ने हम इस चर्चा में किया है, और लोगों को ये जानकारी देना चाहते हैं कि भाई ये सब का पैसा जो है ये सब का हर एक नागरिक का पैसा है, और हर एक नागरिक का हक बनता है कि चंद्रयान के 3 द्वारा क्या हो रहा है, किस तरह आपने बजट कट की है, फिर भी वैज्ञानिकों ने किस तरह वो लोग सफलीकृत वहां पर ये करा है, इसके बाद में हम और क्या करने वाले हैं उससे, और उससे हमारे समाज को किस तरह लाभ पहुंचने वाली है, और हमारे युवक युवतियों को किस तरह वहां कर जानकारी लेके उसमें जो दिलचस्पी है उसको करनी चाहिए, और साथ में G20 के द्वारा हमको क्या हासिल होगा, केवल राजनीतिक प्रयोजन या हर एक नागरिक को अपना हक आएगा, या हमारे उसके ऊपर हर रिसोर्स के ऊपर वो जो भी है वो कमाने की उसका हक जो बनता है उसके लिए वेलफेयर या डेवलपमेंट में कुछ उसमें हिस्सा होगा उनका, या और उसके हालात जीवन प्रमाण में बदलाव आएगी G20 के द्वारा, ये सब कुछ बताना चाहिए। इसके बिना ये हंगामा जो है गलत है, आंकड़े ही आज बता रहे हैं आपके ऑन स्क्रीन पे। इसीलिए
ठीक है,
आप
एब्सोल्युटली।
सोचिए। और मैं थैंक्स करता हूं सौम्य दत्ता जी, गॉड ब्लेस यू,
धन्यवाद।
thanks a lot, do take care, do support DRTSPR channels, Citizen DRTSPR channel and Environment People DRTSPR channels. They are all in larger public interest only. No enmity against
ठीक है,
individual, nor animosity against any party or organizations, please. Issue as per rule of law, constitution invoking evidential act.